anyway, yes, this proposal that we passed unanimously banned Mendip District Council from spraying glyphosate in the public areas of our town with immediate effect. Now, afterwards, we did sit down and think, perhaps we've been a bit gung-ho about this. We've just said, right, stop spraying now in the middle of the growing season with no alternative in place. But we had to ride on the wave of enthusiasm that we had in our townsfolk, and we did just that, and we got the vote through. It wasn't easy. We fought and argued long and hard across the table. And again, just to move on from some of the things that we've already heard this morning, there's a bank of councillors on the council with us who we like to refer to as the old boys, no disrespect, the old school councillors who are resistant to change, suspicious of anything new, and in some cases particularly suspicious of anything that comes from a Green. But I've said I'm not going to get political, so I'm not. Now, we argued long and hard. We had done our homework, however. I have a scientific background. I anticipated the resistance I was going to meet. And like this gentleman here was saying, you have to actually be ready with the arguments. The scientific research backs up the claims. When I was sitting here this morning, before everyone else arrived, because I was a bit early, I was looking through this bag that PAN have handed out, and I could have wept with joy to look at, where are we first? This document, which I would say is an absolute godsend for any of you wanting to put this forwards, because I didn't have this last year when I was doing my research. I was blindfolded, blinkered, and completely in the dark. I spent hours late at night at my computer researching various scientific papers to see if I could get evidence. It's all in there now, which is equally fantastic. I had very little help. Myself, my fellow councillor, a couple of members from the community, one of whom is an absolute dynamo of a social and political and environmental activist who really championed the social cause, the health effects on humans, the potential health effects on humans. And the other is a very good friend of mine who makes all her own cosmetic and beauty products by walking on the slopes of Glastonbury Tor and gathering herbs and plants. And she, I think Nick touched on this earlier, she had seen a decline in dozens of species of plants on the Tor. She's lived in Glastonbury all her life. She's been walking the slopes of Glastonbury Tor daily all her life and has noticed over the years a decline in certain species. And what really brought the matter to her complete concern, and when she raised it with me, was she'd been out one morning and she'd seen the guy walking around spraying certain areas of thistles. Decided not to go too near where he was spraying, but a little bit afterwards went over to the thistles where he'd been spraying and had a look, and there were bees, apparently. I wasn't there, but I trust her word. There were bees on top of the thistle flowers dying, basically, dozens of them, which does not bode well. I presented all of this to our council. I presented the evidence from research papers from around the world into probable and possible and proven detrimental effects. And we still had a really tough fight on our hands because it's not banned in the UK, and it says it's safe to use, and the regulatory body says it's safe to use. So once again, I'd done my homework, and I knew, for example, that the company who gives it its clean bill of health is actually owned by Monsanto. I knew, for example, when the EFSA published their study later on last year, and the first thing our fellow councillors did was to come running into the council chamber waving this document saying, there we go, glyphosate is safe. I knew that you could not compare that study with the IARC study that was done earlier in the year because they were testing different things. The IARC study was testing the end product, which is what Robin was talking about, the importance in understanding that you have to test the end product, whereas the EFSA study was simply studying glyphosate in isolation. Of course, everybody who wanted to draw conclusions from that drew conclusions from that and said, well, here we go, it's safe after all. We argued and argued, and we got our ban, basically, because we lent very heavily on the precautionary principle. As a town council, we have a duty of care to our residents and to our community, and that's fundamentally what we leaned on as heavily as we could to get it through. I'm hoping that some of this is stuff that people can take away, and when you go back to your councils or any other councils who might hear this, as just some pointers really to be able to take back into your own process. Keep it general pesticides and not just glyphosate. Play the science card. I've written some notes here, I can barely read them myself. Use your community as a resource. Our community were the ones that actually got behind this, and on the back of which we managed to get this through, and our community are still supporting us and driving it in part as well. Do your homework, get the answers to the questions that you're likely to receive. Don't underestimate the opposition that you may well get from fellow councillors. And one final thing, one of the problems that we've encountered throughout the whole process has been apart from the resistance within our council itself, has been a resistance to change within our council staff as well.